so
No,
I can
I
hold
can
you
do it.
ransom if you promise me something.
I'll give you a link to the recording if you want it. So I just
Oh, really?
I'm not getting any younger as what's going on, so I use these recordings to remind myself. So thank you for that. I'll just look back at the meeting. Jenny, did you find it yet? The email.
Yeah, I've got it here in
What was the
front
date,
of
please?
me. The original date was the 15th of June,
Thank you.
I think, or 12th of June. Sorry.
No. Oh, yeah, the 12th of June, yeah.
Jenny, would you mind sharing your screen? That might make it.
Yep, I can share my screen.
Thank you. I'm just looking for it.
Okay.
So over you. Sorry about that.
So I think the first dot point, which says some 400 level units have prerequisites, that's pretty standard right across all TAFE courses. There are lots of courses where there are prerequisite units in courses, aren't there?
Yeah,
Yes?
yeah, it's quite common. Yeah, that's quite
Yeah,
common.
absolutely.
And EBS, what do I call it now? EBS or SMS?
Well,
It's still. Sorry, you go, Dave. Yep.
No, sorry, Johnny. Yeah, it's still EBS, but there will be a point that will become SMS, Student Management System, but that point is not actually known exactly
EBS
yet.
then. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I gather that it's standard procedure in that you just look at the units for a particular course, you work out. Oh,
That's fine.
Okay, you work out.
Sorry, I'm just sharing those points on the screen. I hope that you can see them. Yeah.
Okay. The EBS team determines, this is standard procedure in courses, if there are units in the courses that have prerequisites, and I imagine that'd be pretty standard procedure, that if there's a prerequisite that you can't get a course completion in the course until you've done both the prerequisite and the unit. Would that be, is that a given or not?
So that's set up by Glenn Way's team when they set up a course, so that it's going to be meeting all of the training packaging requirements. So if we run a can complete course on a student in that course, it does go through and make sure that it's meeting those rules. So we because this is a unique circumstance, we just need to make sure that those are in there, those rules are in there. That's all.
Okay, so there's nothing unusual there.
No.
Okay, now this one was a bit of a red herring because we weren't quite sure how to handle this. I don't know whether this happens in other courses. This is completely new. This has never happened in relation to TPC before. But in the Certificate 3 Pathways to Further Studies, which is also being reaccredited at the same time as TPC, there will be a whole set of pairs of units. So there could be...
So it's a case of, are you comfortable with the TPC as it was?
The structure of it?
No, I don't have a great deal of information about it, no.
Basically, it's the TAFE equivalent of the HSC. So we've got the English, the sciences, maths and humanities are the basic units. So when we went out to our stakeholders, they said for the Cert, and the Cert 3 has always been like the first half of the Cert 4. So the units have been exactly the same in both. What we are now having to do is provide two courses, one a Cert 4 which has got Cert 3 units embedded in it, but also a Cert 3 which is offering to a different cohort. So the first one's going to uni, the second one is providing people with an equivalent course but shorter units. So what we did was we took the 300 level units in the Cert 4 and split them into two, so that they're basically the same, although the wording is slightly different so that it doesn't look like they're identical.
For ASQA purposes. But for example, the 300 level English unit, which is a core unit in the tertiary preparation, there will be two shorter core units, English units in the C3 pathways, and if the students do both those...
It's equivalent to the TPC 300.
Can I ask a question, just so I'm clear?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about, so we've got a unit X, and we've split it in half. So it's level 3 unit and certificate 3, and we've split it in half, and we've put it into the Cert 4 as two. No.
C4 has the big units, the full units, and we've had permission from ASQA that the students can do 3 of those 300 level ones. Those big
Okay.
units have been split into halves, and the half units are in the Certificate 3 Pathways course.
Okay. So
What
just
we're doing is trying to respond to two different sets of stakeholders. The ones who want to
yeah,
prepare for uni and they want to do the full 72-hour unit blocks of the students who are used to studying in that format. The lower level, they want students to have faster expectations met.
yeah,
So if
sure.
they've only got to do a 36-hour unit, they can say, okay, we've got this one now.
Yep.
If we want to continue on to the second one, we've then got the equivalent of
So what
the
we
other.
need to ensure, and this could, if there's no way to do it in EBS, it can be done by non-standard recognition if necessary down the track, but that would be clumsy if we could possibly, you know, what's the word, automate or make the system happen automatically. That if we're using the example, say, the English, but let's say in the Certificate 3 course they do the 2 required short English units.
Yeah.
And then they at a later date decide to go on to the Certificate 4 in Tertiary Preparation. What we want to ensure is that the students who've done the 2 necessary short units will automatically get the credit for the equivalent longer unit in tertiary preparation. Does that sound possible?
That does sound possible. Just one more quick question, just for clarification. In the Certificate 4, that's okay if we've got 1 unit and we've split it into 2, and then in the Certificate 4 we can just because it is actually 1 unit, although it's been split into 2, we can just give an equivalence of that. That's no problem from an RPL perspective. That's fine. The question I had was around. You mentioned 3 units. As you know, we can only, if we've got a unit, we split in half. We can only give that as a whole. We can't give half of that. If that
no, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yep.
In the Cert 4, they would be doing things like either having an English humanities strand or maths science strand, say, and they need 3 units of those to be able to complete, because in the TPC, the top 3 scores that they get go towards what's called a TES, a tertiary education score,
the 400
which is then transferred across to the UAC ATAR rating. So the idea is that they need to do these 300 level units as prereqs to be able to do the 400 levels. So it'd be a total of 6 in the Cert 3 units, equating to 3 in the Cert 4.
That makes sense. So all we have to do then is just make sure.
Okay, so in relation to that, would you suggest, like, is it the proper thing to do, or just makes it complicated that in the 400 level units, and for example, let's say it was the core English level 4 unit, the prerequisite for that is the 300 English unit, the full 300 English unit, or having completed both of the 2 short units in the lower level course. Would you advise us in the prerequisite section of the unit guide to say that the prerequisite is either the full level 3 unit or the 2 short ones added together? Would you rather us put it in there or leave it out?
That's a good question.
It doesn't have to go in there if you can provide something in the background in EBS to make it happen. Just please advise us what to do.
I'm thinking we aren't going to have the capability with EBS, and Jenny, you might have more information, but from an EBS point of view, we probably aren't going to. I'll just explain. So EBS is on the way out, if I can use that term. So there's not a lot of wriggle room for us to be able to do special things in the context of EBS. SMS is a different matter, but EBS, I think we're sort of stuck there. But it'll just depend on, to be honest with you, it will depend on what ASCA comes back with. However ASCA described those two smaller units that are actually 1 unit, just depending on the descriptors of that. I think we'll just need to look at that. So we'll probably wait for the ASCA process to finish. I mean, the main thing will be whatever they are, whatever they're called, is we map them. And then the wording, you're right, I think we can leave that until the ASCA process finishes, but then we'll need to make it a call. Do we call it what it really is? You know what I mean? Or do we call it the 2?
It's probably better to keep it out of ASCA's hands.
Probably. We just need their advice, but what advice they come back with when they approve, hopefully. What the solution is.
That's very helpful. And look, as I said, at The other alternative is, if none of these things happen, is just simply it goes through as a non-standard recognition process. And there's probably not going to be, around the state, there's probably not going to be huge numbers of people in this situation. I don't think we'll be going looking at thousands of students. It might be, maybe a few hundred,
10 to 20.
10 to 20. It could be, I'd say be less than 100. So it's not a big deal, you know.
So we could manually manage that RPL in that case then. Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing is that this is not going to be, the reaccreditation won't occur until at least October this year, if it does go through. Therefore, it wouldn't be affecting anything until the SMS comes in anyway.
That's right. It gives us 12 months, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Janie, did you have more to add? Sorry, before we moved on from that topic.
No, just that at this stage, EBS, because it's on its way out and because everyone's sort of, all teams are scrambling to get SMS up and running, we can only sort of think about what we're going to recommend or request for SMS as just, in an ideal world. But yeah, for EBS and for now, and it won't matter anyway. It's not going to happen. So.
But it's just that the thing we just were describing about the RPL business is not critical, but the next stuff about the way the units, the assessment of level 4 units is set up, this is absolutely critical. If this doesn't happen, then we will not get the results recorded correctly, and those students will not be able to get their TES score, and they will not be eligible then for UAC. So the next part, we just simply can't say, SMS is coming and EBS is going out and we won't worry about it. I'm sorry, but you have 1,000 ministerials on their desk if you do that.
There's a possibility, Jane, you might be able to correct me, but there is a possibility in EBS to still pass somebody without recording. I've forgotten the exact. Janie, can you recall there's a technical possibility we could use in EBS to attach a graded mark, and I think one of the other complications is it can potentially be less than 50% as well, can't it? It can be between 45 and 49, from what I understand.
Yes. That is correct. We can have that in there. So yeah, we can request that. But if we can just backtrack a tiny bit, if you could just please just give a little bit more framework around that last point, if you can just explain a little bit to us, because you've got to remember that we're coming in without knowing a lot about this particular course. So if we can just have a bit more about that.
Okay, well, just first of all, currently in EBS, TPC, the marks, the way the marks are calculated and recorded is okay at the moment. It's not entirely correct, but it works, right? So in other words, if nothing else happens, at least please maintain the current situation. But I'll let Lorraine say a couple of words then about the way it's set up, if you like. The way, no, okay then. All right. So at the moment, what should happen, and I think in most cases this has happened, but it's when EBS first came in, it took a little while before this was clearly established, is that for the 400 levels, students for each of those 400 levels which are used to calculate the TES score, that's the tertiary entrance score that UAC uses, there are 2 mandatory assessment events. Students must sit for both of them, but they don't actually have to pass both of them. So a student could get, 20% in one, which is a fail, but get 60% in the other. You put the 2 marks together, as long as the combined mark is over 50, or in that section between 45, 49, they will pass, and that mark will be calculated. Now, the raw mark is then scaled, and that is to allow for all sorts of statistical anomalies that occur around the size of the student cohorts in particular subjects, the difficulty of the exam varying from year to year. This is standard procedure for the Board or for NESA as well, that for these type of marks where there's it's a statewide process for university selection, So there is a field in EBS now for the scaled marks to go in after the raw marks are entered, right? And so we need to maintain that. Now, there is a small anomaly that occurs, and that's the second point there, which I've said, is ensure that students who receive a pass scaled mark also receive a pass mark for the unit. So if a student has a raw, total mark of assessments for, say, physics, for example, 400 physics level, which can be, quite a difficult exam, the student might have got 35% as a raw mark. Now, that scaled mark, if it was a particularly difficult exam, could end up becoming, say, 50%, which is a pass. But they might get a pass for the calculation of their TES score and get university entrance, but then the EBS system actually fails the unit because the failure is based on the raw mark rather than the scaled mark. So there needs to be some correction of that problem. I'm not quite, because it is, as it stands, it's possible for people to actually fail tertiary preparation but actually be regarded as having passed the subject in the unit for the purpose of university entrance, and that's a bit odd. Now, so the other dot points there are that the student, as I said, because they don't have to pass individual units, they just have to pass the total. It's really important that each of those mandatory assessments are set as a pass mark of 1, because it's very, very easy to sort of say, oh, well, I've got to pass each assessment, but that's not the case. And you can't have it set up that way because it'll automatically fail someone who doesn't get, say, 25 out of 50. And there have been quite a few cases. Initially this happened, and then it went to a centralised process, which has happened over the last year or so, where assessments have been set up in a centralised area for the institutes. Like, you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, and even those teachers requested, I know as a head teacher I was doing this, you'd send off your request to the offering team and specify that students didn't have to pass both and they only had to get 1 mark. And when it came back, they'd be ignoring it. They'd just set it up the way they wanted to. And if the head teacher wasn't on the alert for that, or they didn't know, they just go along and put their results in thinking everything was okay, and then realise down the track that it wasn't okay. And then the head teacher then has to go and remove absolutely all the marks, fix it up, or get the offering team to fix it, and then re-enter all the marks. And that can take days.
And the big issue here is that there are time constraints, because when you're looking at UAC getting out their offerings, they need to be in really sort of bang, 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 so that they can just click over like that.
And all,
which is hard.
And all the results have to go in so that the tertiary preparation statistics team behind the scenes, which will be happening through the skills point, those marks have to be in the correct format in a sufficiently, timely fashion, so that the marks can be skimmed off, so that you have the pool of marks for a statistical analysis to produce the scaled marks that are then entered. So time is really critical, and the setup is really critical, and the offering team need to listen to the head teachers when they tell them how it's set up, and not just set it up how they think it should be set up.
So I believe that's the answer to this. You do have unique requirements around this course, and it's a high risk. So I think the way we address it, and Janie and I'll talk about this offline, but we'll need to get advice about who exactly that is. It may be Glenn's team, Janie, potentially, but we'll certainly need to take these special requirements for this course into account. That's one thing. The other thing the question I had was, how advanced is the skills point at being able to manage the requirements you just spoke of? Do we have the capability within the skills point to manage that? the statistical side, the analysis of the data, so that we can determine the the sliding variable for the marks. Is that do we have that capability in the skills point yet?
Oh, Kerry, that's what Warren does. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there absolutely will not be a consistent factor across the board. The scaling will be unique to each individual unit, 400 unit, for each different assessment. So, like there won't be the statistical analysis will be done in the skills point, and then the data just fed back for entry. There won't be a consistent factor. Does that answer your question? Not very satisfactorily, but it's the answer.
Sorry, I'll just try again. So from a skills point of view, from your skills point of view, do you have a process, a procedure to manage this? So we're talking about individual students undertaking individual units, and then the outcome of their assessment events. So they've got to that point, they've done their assessments. Then we need to apply some variables which are around, as you spoke, around the variables that then adjust the grading, if you like, of the points for that student. So what I'm trying to ask, sorry, badly, is do you have a mechanism in the skills point to manage those components? Is that part of what's happening in the skills point, or is there something that's a risk here that we need to find a solution for, is what I'm trying to ask?
Look, I'm not over statistics 100%, but I know we have Warren in place, and he does all coordination of statistics. So all we do is check in with Warren at this point. I don't know whether, Kerry, you can speak any further to that.
That's exactly what will happen. But we have to, what has to happen before he can do that is we actually have to have all the results in. Now that depends on the head teachers getting the results in, but it also is critical that the assessment structure is in place and correct beforehand. Hopefully that's done well and truly before the last few days when you enter the results.
Does it have another implication too that I'm just thinking as we speak? Sorry, that the skills point, being the central point. We're also talking about now out of the locations in the regions, aren't we? Where the cohorts are actually interacting with. Is that correct? So we actually need. Joni, what are the groups out in the regions that manage the implementation? What are they called? Sorry, what's the group out there?
You mean currently or moving into the new world? Currently, every region has different names for the teams that do things, but into the new world it will be managed differently. But I guess my big comment and concern is that as you're developing, or getting this accredited, you do have to start thinking about things being at that state level, because that's where we're going moving forward. We need to have things consistently done. They need to be set up in the same way in EBS or SMS, so that all of this stuff, and I understand because I've come from a teaching background, so all of the problems and the discrepancies with, the wrong assessments being attached to units and bits and pieces where you can't put marks in and then everything has to be taken out and then you have to scramble at the end, that we need to have it right from the start, and it needs to be the same across the state so that everything's consistent and that there's no confusion with, ed planning teams who are setting up those offerings in EBS. They don't have the confusion or have the worry of having to backtrack or anything like that. So it needs to be the same right from the start. It needs to be the same across the state. So I guess we need to see or consider what can be done in the development level that can make that can facilitate that happen.
Could this be a pilot trial then, make tertiary preparation for the first statewide preparation of the offering?
I don't know that. I don't have the answer for that one. There's just there's a lot going on. So
all right. Now there is one more question that I want to ask, and this is the one that, look, this is just maybe for the future, but it would be absolutely ideal if this could happen. And that is, hang on. Okay, it's the third main dot point, but the first of the round circle dot points, which says provide an extra field in EBS or the new SMS to enter moderated assessment marks, and that's prior to calculating the scaled mark. Now, currently there's a field for the raw marks, The raw marks are then used to calculate the combined mark, which is normal practice for EBS. There's nothing new there. TPC is unique in that the skills point team then takes the raw combined mark, comes up with a scaled mark, which is then re-entered back into EBS to calculate the TES score. We were just wondering, is it conceivable to have an extra field alongside the raw mark, to have a moderated mark before the calculation of the combined mark? Because the reason being is that because all those individual assessments and exams around the state for the mid-semester and the end of the year assessments all go towards that final mark. But no matter how hard you try from year to year, depending on who sets an exam, there always are slight differences in the difficulty of the exam. So, and it's just a way of, it would be an ideal way of ensuring that regardless of the size of cohort of students and from year to year, that any anomalies are accounted for. I mean, that's what NESA does. That's what the old Board of Studies, there are very, very rigorous processes in place. So this is trying to sort of avoid, it's just consistency across the board and for credibility of the course for university entrants, to maintain that credibility. We have no idea whether that's possible. If you don't ask...
My initial thoughts are that in EBS, my honest opinion is it's not going to be possible in EBS because there's, to my understanding, but we'll clarify this, is that there's no more work as such going on with EBS. Yeah. But I definitely think, as back to Janie's point about a statewide approach, I think certainly something we aspire to for the statewide solution. And when there's, where the one RTO, for example, with the SMS, I think this is so. I think it's a good time to raise it. It will need to go through a process with the SMS team, and myself and a couple of colleagues have just started discussing matters with the SMS team. So I'm happy to take this forward. To be honest, there's a whole bunch of priorities, as you'd imagine, around SMS about, so it'll be prioritised. But I think as an aspirational thing, definitely, as getting back to that, one solution for the whole of the state, I think it's something we should aspire to. Jane, do you have further comments?
No, I think you answered that very well. I'll just agree with what Dave said. So yeah, it's a very tricky world at the moment as we're moving out of EBS and into SMS and into the one RTO space. We just have to. We can only recommend at this stage. So
okay. Yeah. So I guess my only question is, at least can we ensure that the current scaled mark and collection process for marks will continue at least for next year until it is maybe possible to consider some of these options, but we do have to ensure that what is there at least can continue unchanged.
I would imagine there shouldn't be any changes to what's there going into next year until everything switches over. So yeah. So and if I can just ask, so how far along are you into the accreditation process? Has it gone away to ASQA yet, and it's waiting for a response? Because I've heard that can take some time for them to respond to you. So
yeah, we've got to have it in 3 months before the expiry date, which will be the end of July.
Okay, yep.
We're still in discussions with our stakeholders at the moment, just finalising, fine-tuning, and so that's where we are. We're about 4 months out, and as we said, once we send it in, it'll take some time, as you said, for them to come back to us. So,
but we're definitely on track. It's all happening. It's fine. All good.
Okay, great. Okay, well, yeah, you've given us a lot of additional information there and some really good explanation around those points. I guess that until we get that response from ASQA, there's not, and just making sure that everything's going to stay as it is, there's not a great deal that we can alter in this current moment. But once you do get that response, I'm thinking that we could, come back to you and look at that mapping and just ensure that everything does stay the same, make sure that things are consistent for everyone and that everything is really nice and clear in this product. So I think that would be the way forward at this stage. Dave?
Okay, thanks for all your help.
And Kristen, thank you very much for setting up this meeting. We really appreciate the effort you've gone to.